Hello and welcome to another episode of Building Stuff Rocks. This is episode 6, and first off I want to mention that I'm going to be using the Atom editor for at least a couple of episodes just to try it out because I've never used it before, and from the first looks it's very similar to Sublime. At least the shortcuts are, as far as I can tell, almost the same. So for example, I can duplicate a line by Command-Shift-D, and I can delete a line by Control-Shift-K. And with Command-T, I have the fuzzy finder, where I can also switch to the recent file very quickly by pressing Command-T. I'm in the tsconfig, and Command-T, I'm in the field list component, like this. And of course, I can also look something up. I've just installed two plugins, the Atom TypeScript package and Git control, which gives me a nice GUI for Git where I can see the diffs, commit, and do all the Git stuff. And there is also the linter package, which will be installed automatically when you install Atom TypeScript, for example. And one thing I had to do is to disable compile on save in the tsconfig JSON. So the Atom editor doesn't compile the JavaScript files next to my TypeScript files because the compiling in this project is done by Gulp. So if you remember, we have a watcher that watches on all the files in the app folder and the index.html and the style CSS. And when something changes, it will execute build and reload. And build and reload, of course, does a build, and the build does a compile. And the compile task will compile all of our TypeScript files. So this is why I deactivated the compile on save. And now I'm going to commit this file. So set compile on save to false. Alright, now the first thing I want to do is to clean up this components folder right here. Maybe make a field and tool and resource package and put the spec files into its own folder. So yeah, I'm gonna try doing that. Alright, now as you can see, I have a spec folder with all the spec files in it, and I had to make some changes. Of course, in the unit test HTML I had to add the spec folder, and in the Gulp file I had to, of course, add the spec folder so TypeScript compiles our spec TS files. And these get, of course, only compiled if we are not in production mode. And in the serve task I have added the spec folder to the watch files. And the component folder, of course, now looks a lot cleaner. Well, first off, because the specs files are in its own folder, and I've created a field folder with the field list component, and this shouldn't be here actually. Alright, and a resource folder with the resource list, and a tool folder with the tool list. And in a tutorial folder we have the tutorial detail and the tutorial list. And I know we have folders with just one file, but I don't know, I like this better because I have all the pages in the root folder and the navigation, and when I want to go deeper, like see the components that are displayed in the field page, then I can go into these folders and maybe there will be more files in the future. Alright, so I'm going to commit these changes. Alright, why weren't these files selected? And I cannot do a commit amend. So, okay, we have to switch to the command line. Oops. Alright, now I know in the last episode I said that I want to put some real content in here so we can see what the page looks like with some more meaningful stuff than just tutorial 1 and tool 1. But if you look at the tutorial service as it is right now, all the tutorials are stored in this tutorial array inside the service, and when you look at this array, here is the title of the tutorial 1 and here is the body, and it's very long, and I think it probably wouldn't be the most brilliant idea to edit the content here, especially if you want to add some headings or some paragraphs. So what I wanna do now is to make some real HTTP calls from this service to some kind of server that will give us our tutorials. And if I can pull it off, this server would be a static server that I can put on GitHub pages, for example, and that somehow reads the tutorials from Markdown files, so that we can write a Markdown file for each tutorial and then somehow returns JSON. So in this tutorial service, we would make HTTP calls to a JSON API and then display the tutorials on the website. So yeah, this is the plan. So first off, I want to add some JSON files somewhere here in a folder and then access these JSON files which will contain the tutorials. And then in the second step, I want to somehow create JSON files from Markdown files so we can write comfortably tutorials in Markdown. So yeah, I'm gonna do that and I'll see you in a bit. So I'm at the point where I'm trying to make an HTTP GET on an URL and then call map on it. And I'm getting this error. Type error, this HTTP GET map is not a function. So somehow I cannot call map on the result of HTTP GET, and after some googling I found out that this is a bug in Angular 2, and then I was like, which version am I using? And I went to cdnjs.com and saw that a new beta release has been released. I'm currently running beta 0 and beta 1 has been released, so I want to update our Angular 2 version and see if maybe the bug has been resolved. This should be fairly easy. Beta 1, and let's do a npm install. And now let's see if the application still works. Of course, I need to start the server. And okay, it's working, but yeah, still the same error. Okay, I need to figure this out and I'll see you later. Okay, it's working now. I had to import the reactive extension library, but this is still weird that I need to import that to use the map function. So maybe they will fix this in the future. But as you can see in the getTutorials method in the tutorial service, I'm doing an HTTP GET on an URL. And this is this file here. I've just copied our tutorials in a JSON file. And then I'm creating a JSON object, convert it into a promise, and then execute the same code as before. And the same thing I'm doing with the getTutorial method. And as you can see, it really works. You can see that a network request to the tutorial JSON is made. And also if I change the file to, I don't know, let's change the title to something. Then you can see that when it reloads, that our title now is something. So yeah, that's very cool. I'm going to do this for all the other services. And then what I really want to do is to create some Markdown files that will be converted to this JSON object so we can write Markdown for our tutorials. Okay, now this is so cool. I have a Markdown file and I'm editing the title like test. And maybe also the content, so test content, and as you can see, the content on the page gets updated automatically. And I can change it back and it will update again. Yeah, this is pretty cool and I'm so happy that this worked and I want to show you how it's done. I basically use two Node.js modules, Markdown to JSON and JSON Transform. These are both two Gulp plugins. So the first one takes a list of Markdown files and creates one JSON file out of it. And this is done here. I'm telling it to use all the MD files in the tutorials folder. And this line is so he creates one Markdown, one JSON file. And the JSON file will be called tutorials.json and will be written to the server directory. And if I run this task, gulp markdown, you can see that it created a tutorial JSON, but this is an object with the file name as the key. But we want to have all the tutorials in an array. So I have created a second gulp task that will go over all the JSON files in the server directory and basically transforms the JavaScript object to an array and then writes it back to the same directory. So if we run the second task, then you can see that, well, I have to close this one, that now we have an array of 3 tutorials. And this is the exact same format we had before, and also you can see that the Markdown is automatically converted into HTML. So I also had to change the tutorial detail component because by default everything is escaped in Angular, but if we bind it to the inner HTML, so I'm binding tutorial body to the inner HTML, then it will render the HTML. Otherwise we would have like a p tag here and a p tag here. Yeah, so now I can actually write tutorials in Markdown. We of course still have to reference the tools and the resources by ID. I mean, this is only a temporary thing. Of course we want to have a database at some point, but I think it's a very nice way to talk to a server without actually having a server. So now I'm going to create the Markdown files for the fields, the tools and the resources, even though they don't have any content. And then we have a nice way to populate the site with some tutorials. Okay, so that's it for this episode. And next episode we will hopefully finally add some content. But yeah, that's it for this episode. So see you next time.